in the UK. Nobody was really the bitch. And I thought, yeah, there's room for a bitch in British soap.
Kim Tate in Emmerdale. Absolute ultimate super bitch in the soaps.
Every line that the writers wrote that was slightly bitchy, I made bitchier, or I gave that certain Kim look, you know?
Who are you?
Can't you tell, Frank? It's me. It's Kim.
This is the story of a woman who spent a decade making millions of people hate her, called the show that made her a household name a sausage factory, walked out twice, swore she would never go back, and then spent 19 years discovering she was more famous for leaving than she'd ever been for staying. Claire King played Kim Tate on Emmerdale for nearly a decade. Nearly 15 million people watched her fly out of the village in a helicopter in January of '99, and the exit earned her the Best Exit Prize at the British Soap Awards. And then, bit by bit, the marriage collapsed, the health battles piled up, and the certainty about what she wanted quietly crumbled, until the day she crept back through a back entrance on the Emmerdale set with her name kept off the scripts so nobody would find out she was there. This is how that journey really happened, and why it took her nearly 20 years to tell the full truth about all of it. Before any of this gets to Kim Tate, we need to talk about Jane Clare Seed. That was the name on her birth certificate, from Bradford in West Yorkshire, and her father was an actor, which meant she grew up understanding that the entertainment world was something real and possible rather than a fantasy served for other people. Raised in Harrogate and educated at Harrogate Ladies' College, she had made her way to the decks at the Warehouse nightclub in Leeds by the time she turned 18. Not dancing there, running the decks. That detail tells you a great deal about the kind of woman she already was. The punk years that followed were genuinely something else. Hair dyed orange, blue, red, purple, green, and black at various points, bin bag dresses, and a work ethic that never slowed down even when the venues weren't exactly glamorous. Bands called Fidea and To Be Continued, both of which she sang in and managed, supported the likes of U2 and OMD on their way up. Then came Visual Records, her own record label, founded from scratch. For 4 years, she lived with the guitarist of Zodiac Mindwarp and The Love Reaction, a fellow who performed under the name Cobalt Stargazer, and she appeared in their music videos as well as videos for Elvis Costello, as far removed from the rolling hills of Emmerdale as it is possible to get, and that's the point. Acting had crept in alongside all of that. Small film roles, small TV appearances in The Bill, Wish Me Luck, and Alas, Smith and Jones, where she shared her first on-screen kiss with Mel Smith, which must have been a story worth telling at dinner parties for years. The stage name King came from her equity registration, chosen in tribute to horse racing and to a certain fellow from Memphis she had always admired, and both inspirations pointed towards someone who thought in terms of royalty rather than runners-up. None of that, though, was the thing that would change everything. What changed everything was something she had been doing since the age of 7. She could ride horses, and she could ride them brilliantly, and in the latter part of the 80s, that turned out to matter more than anything else on her CV. Emmerdale, by that point, was going through a change it badly needed. Since the early 70s, it had aired as Emmerdale Farm, a gentler to more rural drama that never quite sat in the same conversation as Coronation Street or EastEnders, when audiences wanted big storylines and big viewing figures. November of '89 brought the rebrand, dropping the word farm from the title and signaling something new was coming. A few weeks after that, the Tate family arrived in the village, and with them came a woman who would alter the entire identity of the program. Kim Tate's first appearance landed in December of '89, arriving as the young wife of wealthy patriarch Frank Tate, played by Norman Bowler, and from the moment she stepped on screen, it became clear that something had shifted. The Independent later captured it neatly. Kim's arrival meant Emmerdale was suddenly more dynasty than Dales. That was, it turned out, entirely deliberate. Claire King had walked into that role with a clear plan. A devoted fan of Dallas and Dynasty, she had looked at British television and spotted a gap that nobody had filled. There were characters who did bad things in British soaps, yes, but a calculated, glamorous, utterly ruthless schemer who never apologized for any of it. That type simply did not exist over here. Kim Tate was built to fill it, and the writers understood exactly what they had. Worth noting, too, is that the character had originally been planned to marry Frank's son, Chris. Somewhere in the early discussions, a writer pointed out that Kim was precisely the sort of woman who would skip the son entirely and marry the wealthy father directly. That one observation told the audience everything they would ever need to know about her, so the character connected with viewers almost from the off. The more they loved to hate her, the more the writers gave her, and what followed across the next 10 years stands as one of the most entertaining runs a single character has managed in the history of British soap. The pattern set itself up early. Kim had an affair with a man called Neil Kincaid, and Frank discovered it on Christmas Day of '92 in about the most humiliating way possible, finding an expensive watch on Neil's wrist that had originally been bought as a gift for Frank. Out went Kim. She divorced Frank, set up stables under her maiden name, and carried on entirely unbowed, which was the only mode she ever operated in. On the 30th of December 1993, like a plane crashed into the village of Emmerdale in a sequence that was one of the most ambitious things British soap had ever attempted, and 18 million viewers watched it, a record the program has never beaten. Kim's stables were destroyed in the crash. Kim herself survived, naturally. Back with Frank by December of '94, she wasted no time beginning a new affair, this time with a younger lad called Dave Glover, played by Ian Kelsey, and what she did to protect that secret belongs in a different category of television entirely. When a man called Nick, the brother of another character, Kathy Bates, threatened to expose everything, Kim got on her horse and trampled him. Around the same time, she'd also been trying to bring on Frank's heart attacks through sustained pressure and provocation. Playing games was not in her vocabulary, and Frank eventually found out about Dave anyway. His response was to hire a private investigator, gather the evidence, and then offer Kim £1 million to end the affair, stay with him, and name him as the father of the child she was carrying, given that the question of whether Dave or Frank was the father had become genuinely uncertain. £1 million to name the man she was already married to as her child's father. Kim took it without a moment's pause. James Francis Tate arrived in September of '96, and 2 months after that, on Boxing Day, Dave Glover died in a fire at Home Farm, sustaining fatal injuries in the act of saving baby James from the flames. The man she had turned everything upside down for was gone. And that loss, rather than breaking her, appeared only to sharpen her further. What came next was the sequence that turned Kim Tate into something permanent in the British television memory. She vanished from the village. A woman turned up dead at the wheel of her car. Frank identified the body as Kim and found himself arrested for her murder, and the whole country became absorbed in the story. Then, in May of '97, Kim walked back into Emmerdale alive and composed, having paid a lookalike to drive her car while she spent the preceding months in the Caribbean. Frank had been grieving and facing a murder charge for a woman who had been sitting on a beach somewhere. 13 million viewers watched the confrontation. The shock of seeing Kim alive triggered a heart attack in Frank, and Kim stood there and watched him go. Not just watched, but delivered the line that has never quite left the public consciousness. "You're a dinosaur, Frank," she told him, "and you know what happened to them." After which she took out her compact mirror, confirmed he was dead, and reapplied her makeup. Radio Times would later write that Kim Tate basically wrote the book on British soap bitches. That verdict was more than earned in that single scene. By January of '99, the final chapter was underway. A marriage to business partner Steve Marchant, followed by framing him for crimes he had not committed. and a confrontation with stepson Chris Tate, who ended up unconscious on the floor after an encounter with a paperweight, followed by Kim confessing her role in Frank's death and walking out to a waiting helicopter with her son James and £190,000 of Chris's money. The pilot asked whether she was Kim Marchant. No, she told him, Kim Tate. Nearly 15 million people watched her leave. Best exit at the British Soap Awards followed. The exit felt, and was intended to feel, like total victory. Except that the real story of why Claire King left Emmerdale was considerably more layered than a triumphant helicopter departure suggested. The truth was that she had tried to leave more than 2 years before that helicopter ever took off. Back in October of '96, Claire had told producers she was done, and in the Sunday Mirror reported at the time that she had been offered somewhere in the region of £30,000 to £35,000 on top of her existing £70,000 a year to stay. She turned it down. Her final scenes under that contract aired early in '97, the ones where Kim faked her death. And then, just days after the contract expired, producers came back with better storylines and a meaningful pay rise, and she agreed to stay for the scenes where Frank died. Then she stayed for almost 2 more years before finally walking away. For good. When she did go, the candor was striking. A sausage factory was the phrase she used in the Mirror, and it landed because it was so blunt and so clearly drawn from lived experience rather than bitterness. Waking up on a cold morning knowing 12 hours of work were waiting, she told the paper, was something she would not miss. The exhaustion had been relentless, she said, describing how she would collapse when Saturday came and then start learning lines again on Sunday, how she had never taken a day off throughout her time on the show, and how flu and colds would arrive the moment she finally took a holiday because her body had been holding them at bay through sheer necessity. The atmosphere had changed too, and she was honest about that. Back when the show went out 3 times a week and the cast was smaller, she said, there had been time for a laugh. Time to be a company of people who enjoyed one another's company. As it expanded and grew more successful, something had been lost. Cliques had formed. People arrived, did the work, and left as quickly as they could, and she found that sad. Say, because it had not always been that way. There was one specific personal tension she addressed in her autobiography. Her working relationship with Norman Bowler, who played Frank, was not a warm one, and whenever kissing scenes came up in the script, she made a point of eating garlic-heavy food beforehand. If the scenes were going to be unpleasant for her, she had a way of sharing the experience. And yet, for all that candor, she could still say clearly that a soap is a good training ground, and that if you can do one, you can do anything. The relentlessness she had complained about had also built her into something she would not have become any other way. What the public did not know at the time, and what Claire had kept carefully hidden through most of her first decade on the show, was that she had been fighting something else entirely. Around 92, not long after joining Emmerdale, her fingers started swelling. The diagnosis came back as rheumatoid arthritis, and she kept it to herself for approximately 5 years, playing one of television's most glamorous and physically commanding characters, while quietly managing a painful, progressive condition. The horse riding, the outdoor shoots, the long, cold days on location in Yorkshire, all of it was happening while her joints were working against her. Years later on, Lorraine, she put it plainly. "I have rheumatoid arthritis," she told the presenter. I first got it actually in the early 90s with Emmerdale and the horse riding, and it's been a painful battle for the last 25 years, really. Metal now sits in some of her fingers as a result of the condition, so her costume department has to do up her buttons for her, and weekly pills and injections are part of her routine. Her work as a patron of the National Rheumatoid Arthritis Society grew from a private battle that very few people knew about during the years it was at its worst. On Strictly Come Dancing, paired with Brendan Cole and finishing 6th, she got through the entire run with painkillers and bandages on her feet, as she later acknowledged. Nobody watching would have had any idea. That was always the point, and that discipline, the ability to keep performing without letting the cracks show, ran through everything she did. The professional truth, then, involved exhaustion, difficult relationships, and a hidden health battle. The personal truth sitting alongside it was harder still. July of '94, and right in the middle of her Emmerdale years, Claire married Peter Amori, the actor playing Chris Tate, Kim's on-screen stepson. The tabloids predictably went daft for it, and both of them had to live with that particular angle for as long as the marriage lasted. For a while, it worked. And then it fell apart, and when it did, the circumstances carried a specific kind of pain. Claire discovered the affair when a letter arrived from Nick Moore, the partner of Samantha Giles, the actress who played Bernice Blackstock on Emmerdale. Not a confrontation, not catching anyone in the act, but a letter from the other person's partner. She gave Peter a second chance. He went back to Samantha. The geography of the situation made everything more difficult because Claire was in London filming Bad Girls at the time, while Peter was back at the Emmerdale studios in Yorkshire, working every day alongside the woman he was seeing. There was no version of that marriage that could survive it. Speaking to the Mirror years later, she described a moment of black comedy buried in the whole sorry business. Peter had once commented that she only came home to see her dogs and horses, and her thought at the time, she admitted, was, well, yes, and to catch you at it. On Loose Women, she was briefer. I gave my husband Pete a second chance, she said, and 2 strikes you're out. The story has a coda that says something about how she carries herself. At the funeral of Emmerdale cast member Richard Thorpe, Samantha Giles came to find her and apologized directly, acknowledging that it had been a long time, but saying she needed Claire to know she was sorry for everything that had happened. Claire's response was, "Good on you, girl, for apologizing." The anger had left. It does not appear to have been replaced with anything lasting in its place. From the moment that helicopter cleared the Emmerdale roofline in January of '99, Claire threw herself into other work without looking back. The standout role was Wing Governor Karen Betts in Bad Girls, in a character built entirely opposite to Kim Tate in temperament and moral makeup, and a TV Quick Award for Best Actress came with it. The show's fan base, she said, was incredibly strong, stronger than anything she had encountered anywhere else. Between 14 and 17, she played Erica Holroyd on Coronation Street, though that chapter ended when she concluded the character had been pushed aside under a new producer. Guest appearances across Hollyoaks, Holby City, Casualty, Doctors, and others kept her busy alongside all of it. The autobiography, Confessions of a Bad Girl, arrived in 2006 and covered the gossip, the heartbreak, and the whole journey from Bradford punk to soap royalty. A fitness DVD she put out in 2008 sold over 50,000 copies within days of its release. Through all of it, the question of Emmerdale kept resurfacing, and for years, the answer never changed. May of 2003, she told the Mirror flatly, "They work you to the ground, and that's why she would never go back." 4 years on, she had shifted slightly. The door is closed but not bolted, she allowed. By 12, she was telling Digital Spy it would be great to go back for a week, create mayhem, and then bugger off again. Fans had never really accepted the idea of a permanent departure. They never asked whether she was coming back, only when. The answer turned out to be 2018, and the whole thing was handled with a level of secrecy that suggested the production team knew exactly how big the return would be. Claire's name came off call sheets and scripts entirely. Access to the set came through a back entrance, away from fans and photographers. And by the time the announcement landed in September of that year, she had known about it for roughly 12 months and had told nobody. Guest appearances across a special week of episodes in October followed. The reaction was overwhelming, and a permanent return was confirmed that same month. Asked why she had finally said yes after turning the offer down so many times, she was open about the thing that had held her back. Coming back might ruin the character she had feared, and that fear was the honest one. She had left on her own terms in a helicopter with her head held high, and the last thing she wanted was to come back and undo what that exit had meant. What changed her mind was Joe Tate, Kim's grandson, having already returned to the show and put a Tate name back in the village. The timing, she told Lorraine, just seemed to slot in. Back on the Emmerdale set for the first time in 19 years, she described it as feeling like a new job at first, until she arrived at home farm, and then the old boots came on and she was back, and it felt really at home. Executive producer Jane Hudson said Kim Tate was just getting warmed up for 2019. That assessment proved accurate. Kim returned and planted herself back at the center of everything, scheming, commanding, and entirely without apology. A new contract followed in the summer of 25, with sources telling The Sun that the bosses love Claire and are delighted she's going nowhere. Rumors about Kim's future on the show tend to surface periodically, and her response is the same each time. From my side, she says, she would like to stay in Emmerdale, but she has read things suggesting Kim's fate is doomed, and she has certainly not read anything like that in the scripts. Series producer Kieran Roberts once explained why Kim Tate was never killed off, never written out with any permanence, never truly finished. He called her the ultimate survivor and described her helicopter exit as signifying her triumph over those around her. Radio Times offered a different angle, writing that Kim Tate basically wrote the book on British soap bitches. Both verdicts carry weight. The numbers carry their own weight too. 18 million people watched that plane come down in December of '93. 13 million watched Frank Tate die in May of '97. Nearly 15 million watched the helicopter take off in January of '99. Best exit at the British Soap Awards. I followed 19 years later by one of the most celebrated returns the show has ever seen. A punk from Harrogate who dyed her hair 6 different colors, ran her own record label, and supported U2 before anyone was paying much attention. A woman who had ridden horses since the age of 7 and spent a decade on national television quietly hiding the fact that her joints were deteriorating beneath the surface. A wife who gave a second chance that got thrown straight back, and who then met the woman responsible at a funeral years later and told her well done for having the nerve to apologize. An actress who called the show that made her famous a sausage factory, meant every word of it, and then came back through the back door 19 years later because the character felt like home in a way that nothing else had. And when the pilot on that January evening in '99 asked who she was, she said, "No, Kim Tate. Not a scripted flourish, but something that was simply true." Whatever else she had been across those years, Jane Claire Seed from Bradford, the punk, the DJ, the record label founder, the wife, the woman fighting a condition nobody knew about, she was Kim Tate. She still is, and apparently, she's going nowhere.